I always call it like it's a justified excuse. So if someone's out of shape, they're like, my kid's busy.
The winners just figure out a way to work through it. You need to find a way to get to where you want. And if you don't want it to take you 40 years, that means there's got to be some level of sacrifice there. I think that regardless of what you're doing, you can find passion by being good at it.
So today we have Chris Hintz. He works with AO. I think you started with the company when they were doing 10 million. Now they're doing close to 120. They're a sales distribution organization. I think sales for any business is one of the most important thing. I think it's marketing sales. You guys both do both really well. So I wanted to get you on, share a bit with everyone what, building out a sales team or incentivizing people, I think something you're really good at. Could you maybe just give us a brief introduction, kind of how you got in with the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So never really thought of life insurance, never really thought of running a business, but I was golfing in Calgary. One of the guys that I was teaching just asked me if I liked what I did, and I said yes. And he said, "Do you make enough money?" I said no. He brought me in for an interview. I didn't know it was an insurance company at that time. Walked in, saw it was an insurance company and wanted to leave immediately. I was not really into the cold calling, prospecting, that type of lifestyle. Found out that the company actually has a lead generation system that's been proven. They've been in business for over 70 years and started with them. That was in Calgary. Back then we were all physical location. So, we were out sitting at people's kitchen tables and doing that. Started out there, 22 years old, didn't know anything about insurance, took their system and process, got really good at the insurance sales side of things, to the point of being able to teach and coach other people. And 6 months after, they moved me to Manitoba to run that province. After 3 years in Manitoba and several other moves across Canada, I was really running the majority of offices in Canada. We got up to about $45 million in sales in 2019. And then, of course, COVID hit. The big concern when COVID hit for us is we're an in-home life insurance company. So not being able to go into homes was pretty detrimental. We switched to a virtual platform. From switching to a virtual platform, obviously a lot of confusion, a lot of new systems, new processes, totally different way of operating in every facet of our business. But we were able to go from 45 million to last year just finishing over 114 million in sales with over 4,000 agents. So,
yeah, a couple of things. We were actually supposed to shoot in a golf simulator, but I got double booked. And I also thought it might be kind of triggering for you because every time we golf together, I beat you so badly that might bring up some bad memories.
Never happened.
So obviously you were doing golf, something you liked.
Yeah.
And then the guy asked you that question. And a lot of people, I think, say that, you should follow a passion instead of following money. So how did you kind of balance that? I don't subscribe to that at all. But
that's a good question. I think you hear a lot of that crap. I think that regardless of what you're doing, you can find passion by being good at it. I think, ironically, we're in a room with Team Canada jerseys. And I think of professional athletes probably don't like training day. There's always going to be some things in any position that you don't enjoy. But figuring out what you do, what impact you can make, and find your groove. And I think that creates passion.
Yeah. So on the sales side, I've watched, I guess, your organization a bit, and you can see some guys go from $1 million in a year, right? Pretty quickly. What separates that guy from the guy who makes 10 grand a year forever?
I think there's a couple things that separate high producers, and that's not just in our industry, that's just people. And I think the first is just building an appropriate foundation. And I think what people don't understand is the amount of work that has to go unseen or unrewarded to get yourself to a level to earn that type of reward is ridiculous. And the fact is most people are just not willing to do it. When I look at our business specifically, if I was to point out characteristics of somebody who's going to be really successful, it's someone who's a little bit hard-headed, someone who shows up every day, someone who says or does what they say they're going to do, and then just works through the noise. I think too many people get caught up in focusing on negative aspects of things, and they can't jump over those hurdles the higher the hurdles get. But the winners just figure out a way to work through it.
Do you find a lot more people now that you're virtual stick with it? Like, is it a lot easier to do a cold call than going in cold to someone's house?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell stories for hours on the interesting situations you'd get into sitting at people's kitchen tables in the state of their living. But is it easier? Yes. The challenge with working from home, what we do now is, a lot of people experienced it through COVID when they got sent home to work, is you need a certain level of discipline to work from home. And I think the large majority of people like the idea of working from home, but don't necessarily have the discipline to match up when Netflix is 2 steps away and so is the fridge, and the comforts of being at home. So is it easier in a lot of aspects? Yeah. I mean, we're not leaving our car running in -45 weather in fear that it won't start up again. But there's just different challenges.
Do you think your company will ever get to a place where you're still doing it all virtually, but in an office?
No, I don't think so. I really think that the movement, one of the things that I'll say is, in the last year, there's a lot of corporations that are pushing people back into office who had the ability to work from home. And what we're finding in our recruiting is there's a lot of people who learned the skills of working at home that don't want to commute. Toronto's a great example. We've got a lady who used to commute 3 hours to work every day and then 3 hours back. You just think about the amount of time that someone wastes doing that. So we're finding a lot of really skilled, ambitious people are looking for that work from home. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that we are growing as fast as we are.
So how do you grow culture virtually? Like, you guys obviously big on culture.
Yeah. I don't know that I have all the answers to that yet. I think that when you get like-minded people in a room every single day, I mean, as much as it's nice to, walk around, shake hands, pat backs, do all of that stuff, you can simulate a certain amount of that on Zoom or whatever platform virtual chooses. We still do and make a huge conscious effort to get people together with things like contests, dinners every single month. We do everything that we can to make sure we spend as much personal time with people. And I think those are the big things that really generate culture.
And you guys, obviously the branding, big thing. I think when I seen you for a while at a place we go to before I met you, and I thought you were maybe in a cult or something, because you always had everything on the AO.
Yeah.
But that's obviously a big part of culture, I assume.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know how many companies give out, whether it be a hat like you're wearing, a shirt or whatever, that people just refuse to wear because they're not tied to their workplace or they're not happy that they work there. I think that when you have a company that people really enjoy working for and are proud to represent, that is a significant piece of culture. I also think that it's a really key indicator if people are really bought into what your company's doing, if they represent you and wear your stuff. So I'm all about it. Drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
Yeah, we brand everything. I think I have every article of clothes except underwear, because no one wants access on their. Not a lot of guys are too eager for that, but
that's fair.
Yeah. How do you, so for obviously for sure in your industry, when you start out, I assume the first couple months aren't going to be, you're kind of buying into a big goal, or you're wanting that. How do you keep people motivated those first few weeks or months?
I think that that's a little bit of a common misconception. I think that all depending on how hard somebody wants to work. The best part about our company is we have a system and a process for everything. So if you're a new agent coming in, there's no what do I do or how do I do it? It's all laid out for you. So people are receiving their first paycheck immediately. So it's not, Marshall size numbers, for example, but there is a lot of consistency off the get-go, and it doesn't take that long to get started. To achieve the big numbers, yeah, that's a more long-term goal. How do we keep people motivated? We just figure out what they want. I think the large majority of employers are telling you your job on a piece of paper and telling you the salary that matches that job, where we ask what is it that you want? Because the way our opportunity is formatted is from day one, they have the path to be a senior partner in the company. They know what's available and how to achieve it. And I think that certain aspect of what we do allows people to think a lot different than if they were in a traditional workplace, because their ceilings are pretty clear everywhere else, where ours, there is none. I mean, the top earner in our organization last year, I think, was $6.5 million. And that's coming from 5 years ago. We had one person make over $1 million. So the sky's the limit.
And how much training is there? Like before someone's going out doing calls, is it 20? Like,
there's a lot of training. One of the really cool parts about our culture that we've worked really hard on is creating a culture where the best people share what they're doing. And I think in a lot of organizations, they kind of keep the secret sauce to themselves if they're a high performer. We have it structured where if you want to go and watch the top people in the company from day one, you can. So it's really a culture of showing, not necessarily telling. So there's certain aspects as far as product knowledge is concerned, and technology, how to use it. All of that stuff is, we have a course for that, and people can go through relatively quickly. But as far as getting those phone skills, getting those presentation skills, understanding how to, figure out what a family situation is and figure out what the best products are going to be for them, it doesn't take that long.
And how do you get the top earners or performers to want to share that knowledge? Like, what is there a benefit for them, or is it just culture?
There's no financial benefit for them, other than the idea that their people that they work with can go and watch others doing the exact same thing. The way that our company is formatted is we work in 5 different markets. So we have people who specialize in each one of those markets. And those people are willing to share at any point when they're working. And I think that's just something that we've bred into people from day one. This isn't a culture of being selfish. This is do more for others, and it's worked really well.
When you started out, did you hate the door-to-door thing, or did you? I guess it wasn't really, you had leads, I guess.
Yeah. Did I hate it? No, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. You're meeting different families every single day. When we designed my house, I've picked the pieces of every house that I've ever been into and got to see a lot of them. So there was definitely some benefits there. But I really enjoyed it. I loved being in the field. Just interacting with it's a different story every day.
Yeah, and I think sales, I really do believe, I would say probably marketing's maybe senior to sales, just because if you get enough leads to a bad salesperson, they're probably going to outperform. I know you guys do a lot of marketing, but from what I've seen, it looks like it's marketing to employees, right? Like you're not marketing to the client.
Correct. So our parent company does all the marketing as far as brand awareness, marketing to clients. The large majority of our marketing is just showing our people, spotlighting our people. I think, again, on the culture note, we recognize that as our company continues to grow, it's solely because of the people. So celebrating them, making sure we recognize the wins, big, small, or anywhere in between. But yeah, our marketing is definitely geared towards this is who we are, this is what we do, opportunity unlimited.
So how do you, I know in our business group, we would talk about that a lot, incentivizing people, right? And that's always a struggle. Is it, do you do cash? Do you show the people when you hit this exact metric, you get something, or is it random? I think everyone has kind of a different opinion on that, but what's yours? How do you think a good way to build that out is?
I think there's a couple of things. I think that when you look at incentivizing people, you have to understand people are they want different things. So I'll give you an example. When I was running my Manitoba office, we had this one gentleman, and every single week, if you produced over a certain amount, then the whole room would stand up and clap for you as a performer of the week. And he would hit it every single week just for that 5 seconds of people clapping for him. I have different people who are not motivated by anything material. They just want cash in their bank account. They don't care about a title. They don't care about anything else. And then we have people who love the swag, who love the gifts. And we have people who love the trips and the camaraderie that's built on them. So I think it's not a single answer. I think that you have to look at it in various different ways and what people want. What we've done is we've created a path to partnership that shows somebody from day one, this is what you need to achieve at every single step for your next promotion. And that's something we didn't have in 2009. It was implemented in 2013. And that alone has gotten a lot of growth for us because people know what's available. And when you know what's there, you'll work for it. So that's on the promotion side. On the swag side, our company does an incredible job. Always great stuff, great prizes. And then on the compensation side, I mean, people, it's funny that, Napoleon has that quote, men will die for ribbons. It's funny how many people don't even look at the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 paycheck. They just wait for the certificate to tell them that they did it. So I think it's all of those things.
So that path to partnership you talk about, is that just based on the sales or numbers?
Yeah, it's based off of your contribution of growth to the company. So when we look at a senior partner, for example, the nice thing about our company is you can promote yourself once. You can promote yourself into a leadership position based off of your own personal results. Every other promotion inside of our company has to do with you maintaining a certain level of performance, but mostly how much you improve other people around you. So that's just a direct relation to how much you're growing the company. And the more you do that, the better everything gets.
So do you guys also have training? You obviously have the sales training and kind of that process, but do you have like leadership training?
Yeah. We have a lot of areas as far as leadership development is concerned. That's primarily what I do on a day-to-day basis now, is just leadership development. I think it's one thing when we break it down and look at specific skills as to how someone becomes successful in our company. You have to learn a process to sell. Once you learn that process to sell, the second step would be you now have to start teaching other people that process. The large majority of that is through demonstration. So that's step 2. And then step 3 would be you now need to develop yourself as a leader to teach people how to teach. And I think that's probably the hardest step. I don't want to say it's easy to sell, but it's there. The system and process is pretty simple. Learning how to teach other people, I think that comes naturally. And I think the other thing that happens with that is when you're responsible for other people, your performance increases. It's a funny thing that humans do. When you're responsible for other people's success, you kind of step up as the teacher or the coach. But it's really that third step of, well, how do I teach somebody how to be a coach? How do I teach somebody how to care? that's a challenging step.
Yeah. So when were you a big part of the building all those systems, or were a lot of them in place already?
As far as up until we turned virtual, large majority of that stuff was in place as far as our selling systems and everything else. Once we switched over to a virtual world, everything changed. The way you make phone calls changed. The way you get people into a meeting changed. So there was a huge group effort to figure out, well, if we're going to change to virtual, how are we going to do this? Huge problem.
Did your competition switch to, or were you guys a lot quicker switching? Do you know?
I don't necessarily, in the markets that we work in, we don't really have a lot of competition, if any. I mean, I guess you could technically say every life insurance company is competition. But we're in a facet of the industry that virtually no one's heard about with the markets that we work in and what we do. You're never going to see us publicly advertised as an agency or anything like that. As far as our transformation, we did it very quick. I remember I was in Hawaii for a wedding. We got the call. There was fear that if I didn't get on a plane that day, that planes would stop running and I'd be stuck in Hawaii. Probably should have just stayed there. But I remember getting home and getting on a call with the top leaders in the company and just saying, how are we going to do this? Like, that's a little bit terrifying. But we were changed pretty much completely over to virtual and had a platform running within 3 days. This is very quick.
How many employees now at the company?
There's 4,000 agents.
And when you started, would have been?
When I started, probably 400.
So was there I don't know, with some of the stuff we do with Cardone Ventures, they talk about break points in a company, right? Did you have certain ones where it's 1,000 employees or 50 million in sales, or certain numbers where?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely did. I don't think that we had anything based off of agent number, but we definitely had stall points as far as our overall sales. And I think, for example, when the company started, it took them 10 years to get to $1 million in sales. Then the second 10 years it was 10 million. The next 10 years up to 43. Next 10, obviously 114. But when you look at those stall points, I think that they're tricky to figure out. A lot of the stuff that we did to really break through is, it's going to sound odd, but just repeat the same thing a lot until it works, if that makes sense. In our business, the growth comes from agent count. The more representatives we have doing what we do, the more we're going to sell. But I do remember getting stuck personally, probably about 2019. I got into a comfortable zone. I think anytime that happens, you've made enough money. You're not necessarily motivated by money anymore. You just got to figure out the vision. And I think anytime I stall or anybody else stalls inside of our company, I think it's all based off of loss of vision.
Complacency. Yeah. Well, maybe one day I'll make enough money that I can get complacent too. Do you guys look at your systems now lots and say, this works now, but at 10,000 it won't? Is that something you're forward looking out, or?
Yeah, I think that the biggest competitive advantage that our company has over anybody is the markets that we work in and the lead generation system that we work in. So, for example, we started with unions and associations. That's how American Income Life was founded. So working with over 44,000 unions and associations, whether it be teachers, police, firefighters, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, you name it. At a certain point, we realized as a company that if we continued to just rely on unions, unions were shrinking. They still are. And the responses was not at the rate that it used to be when I started with the company. So that's when we really started branching off into these various markets. And I think that at a certain point, we're just going to need to continue to be creative to sustain that. So whether that be adding more markets or just more aggressively marketing inside of those markets to get more responses.
So what would you say if you're designing the perfect salesperson or person who's going to be successful? What are the characteristics? Like, what are the things they should be focused on? Is it communication, or like what is the key skills that they need?
I think there's a difference between key skills that somebody comes in with and an ability or a willingness to learn them. The one thing that I love about our company is we have people from every industry. They see an opportunity to do more. And it's just about, is that person willing to do the things necessary to get there? I don't think that there's any perfect person. If I look at the partners in the company, if I look at all the top leaders, there's no one that shares the same education. There's no one that shares the same upbringing. There's no specific situation. I think that the things about the people who do win, or what I look for in somebody, is, do they show up? Are they disciplined? Are they reliable? And do they want to learn? And I think if they have that want to learn, every aspect of what it takes to be good at what we do can be taught. The only thing that we can't teach is, do you want to work hard? And I think that's true anywhere. I think the large majority of people who end up giving up, again, they just lack the vision of where they want to be. When I started in the business, one of my mentors, I said, same answer or same question that anybody would ask a mentor. And I'm sure you've been asked this a lot. I know I have, but what's the biggest piece of advice so that you can become successful or make a lot of money or whatever it is? And I think that his answer to me that day, I still give to a new person today. And he just said, don't quit. He said, just stick around. You're going to have great days. You're going to have some really bad days. And you're going to have bad weeks. You're going to have bad months. You're going to have bad years. But when I lift my head up 14 years after starting and see where I am and what I've done, and I reference that back to where's the company and what has the company done, it's all the same. Are you sticking around through the bad stuff? Because it's the only way you get the good.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's my personality type. So with everything, like when I was in high school, I was working out, I was 135 pounds. Like I was very skinny, and it was just, and there was all these kids who like naturally had, and you just did it longer. And now, now probably most of them are fat or whatever, but like you just have to just put in the time. And Andy Frisella talks about that a lot, where it's like, there's a 10-year room. And he's like, if you can make it to there, even the 5-year room, a lot of people are going to drop off. And the 10-year room, it's going to be a lot less. You get to the 30-year room, every single person in that room is successful, right? And real estate's bad for that, where real estate's a blanket term for a bunch of things. So people think, and since I've moved here, it hasn't been that long, 3.5 years. And the amount of people that I've seen that they flipping was the thing. It's like, you have to do this. And then they jump into Airbnb, and that's just the new, and everyone's doing, and then they're doing the next thing, and then they get to the next thing. But it's like, you're never establishing yourself as the person in that industry. And for me, it's like, it's always one thing, and it's going to be that for 20 years. Not that I won't do little things on the side, but I think, even like you, if you jumped around to 10 jobs in that amount of time, you probably wouldn't have made it. But it's very hard. And I sometimes wonder if people, I've been, I guess, blessed to meet people and see people who are 10 times more successful than me, but get to know them enough that you can see that life. And I think, for sure where I'm from is a small town. You don't get access to that. So it's like, you can't really feel it. Like Ed, my lad, always tells the story. He was at a country club. He got invited for a business meeting, and someone let him put on a $10,000 coat, sport coat. And he said he just put it on, and he said, this is how it should feel, And the quote, I think, is like, once you touch the fire, you don't want to live in the smoke. But I think maybe not enough people ever get that, or it's.
Yeah. I think it's two problems. The biggest one is we live in a society where you can go on Instagram and find 10 ways where people are making a ton of money, and it's the new thing, and you got to get in, you got to do it. But they don't realize that the person that's talking didn't start yesterday. So I think there's a lot of jumping around. I don't think that people stick with something long enough. And I think the second thing is that, we're coached or we're taught to find something that you're passionate about, find something that you love. And one of the number one reasons in exit interviews with people who are leaving what we do, they say, I'm just not really that passionate about it. I just don't love it. I was a little bit different at 22, but I didn't really care about anything but money at that point in time, because I did something that I love, and it didn't give me a life that I love. So I think you got to find the balance there. And unfortunately, people don't have the stick-to-itiveness, if that's even a word, to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think the misconception is that, what does it mean to love what you do? Like it. I remember when Suits first came out, I watched that. I'm like, man, that's the life I
wanted to be a lawyer in New York,
right? And now, like I love my lawyer, but I look at him, I'm like, what a job. Like I would hate that so badly, to do the actual work. Now maybe the office is cool, but and now I look at every job that way. I'm like, I cannot think of a job that the actual day-to-day stuff is fun, right?
I don't know that it exists.
I don't think it does. I think that's what keeps people from jumping around or jumping around or not wanting to sit it out. It's like, you're just going to do these it's I don't know if it's a Buddhist thing, but it's like chop wood, haul water, right? And kind of that's what gets you to where you want to be, and you become enlightened, and you go back and you chop wood and haul water, and you create this thing.
I remember my grandfather owned a plumbing company, and when I was gonna start doing this, I had a conversation with him, and he said 2 paths in life that you need to choose. Number 1 is you find something that you love to do, but you can never complain about money. Or number 2, you find something that makes you enough money to live the life that you love. And I think that stuck with me for a long time. I just don't think that people stick with things long enough, especially when there's opportunity there.
Yeah, I got that lesson, fairly early on when I was I don't know, when I opened the gym 22 or something, but that was my passion, right? That's all I wanted to do. And you opened it, and then, we were open 7 days a week. Most days I was there 12 hours, and I went earlier and trained and all. And very quickly, it's like the fun of working out went away. It's like, wow, like you're there and you're doing it, but I don't really think that passion exists when you get any amount of scale. But I think it's hard that the delayed gratification, I think, is what people maybe aren't willing to.
Yeah, they want instant.
Yeah.
They want right now. When I look at anybody, whether it be in a business group or any successful person, I think that's another thing that people need to look for and reach out and vet is, who do I look up to? Who do I take advice from? And where's it coming from? And what results do these people have? But when they see the people that have the results, they just think that happened. And I think telling your story is so important, because when I was in Winnipeg running that office, I was broke. The struggle is where you find out what you're made of. The struggle is where you find out if you can win and if you're going to stick to it. In Winnipeg, I was broke. There was months where, I couldn't really afford rent or afford other bills, and I was running an office, and I was looked at as a successful person. And at that point in time, I just wanted to make $1,000 a week, and I thought if I made $1,000 a week, I'd be winning. But same thing with you and the success you've experienced. They look at today's product and they forget or don't know about the gym or the mobile home park or that picture I love that you shared with us is you and the family digging a hole in the winter. I think it was doing all that stuff yourself, and they just think it's immediate, and it's unfortunate. In your business, lots of people think real estate is sexy. You look at Grant Cardone, he makes it sexy. And there's a lot of evidence to creation of wealth there, obviously. What do you think prevents people from getting to the level of passive income that they go into it looking for?
Yeah, I think two things. And I got someone reached out yesterday and asked me this. Actually, they were like, how do you get to hundreds of units? This is what I want to do. And I told them similar to what we talked about. I'm like, it's like now I've been in real estate, 7 years, and we started with the parks and we did the flips. But the biggest misconception or like lie, and you talked about this earlier when you said that there's so many, look at who you take advice from, right? Is there's more coaches out there with no credibility at all that are teaching people something that doesn't exist, right? The reality about real estate is it is, in my opinion, not even close, but it is the best place to store, to put money into, and it will create wealth over time. It is not the place to make that money. So I tell everyone, I'm like, find you'll never be able to replace $100,000 a year. Very hard to do that right away with real estate, right? So for me, I farmed and ran the gym, and we bought the trailer park, and then we slowly eliminated those, and then we could do the big flip on the park, and we sold the gym, and we had a big enough amount of capital. But like our fund is one of the highest. We pay out a higher distribution. It's 8%. So you imagine if you invested $1 million, you'd be 80,000. Last year we paid out more, but still, you're not replacing $100,000 a year. That's without reinvesting anything. So the ball isn't rolling a lot at that point. Now, if you can have that $100,000 a year job and put in, or whatever you make, but be putting money into real estate and it's growing while you're earning and it's not supporting your lifestyle. And then if you make $50,000 from the real estate and it can roll the next year, compounding interest just in any investment, that's the holy grail. That's the thing that'll get you. The other thing that people don't want, the term passive income, it's just, unless you're investing with someone, right? If someone invests with us, it is passive. They own a part of the property. To do it on your own, that does not exist. And like that's the part people don't see. When we moved here, we sold literally everything we had. We sold our business, we sold our house, we sold everything in our house to do this. Like the guy bought our food. He bought everything, right? So we moved here. We bought our first piece of property, and then we did everything. So our kids came with us in the playpen. They sat there and we renovated the units. And there was nothing passive. That was 7 days a week. That was how our kids grew up. And that now it's different. But now we have some scale and we have years of track record. But at the beginning, it won't be there is no such thing, right? And it's kind of a lie that people buy into, or this thing. And it's just wild to me the amount of people I've seen that just they come and go so quick because it happens. And then and our first property we lost, before we moved we had bought an 8-unit here, and everything that could have went wrong did. We spent, that was supposed to be a great investment, and you just poured money into that building for the first while. Well, if that was our only source of income, if we didn't have another business to support it, wouldn't have been good, right? So I think it just, I think if people build up over time, whether it's on their own or with someone else, and but fund your lifestyle from a job. And I think jobs or careers like you guys have, where it's like you can just actually have tons of cash flow, with just putting in a little bit of work. You're going to, not a little bit of work, but like if you put in the same amount of work doing what you're doing versus real estate, you're going to get the lifestyle you want a lot quicker, and you can put a lot of that money, and you'll probably grow the real estate a lot quicker than you would. And that's a lesson that isn't taught. And the thing I always tell people with advice too, it's like that if the person giving you the advice is making all their money giving you the advice and not doing the business, and that's in real estate, that's my biggest pet peeve. And this is the reason why I want to do a course, is just to be the opposite of that, because it's like they're making all their money running a course and not actually doing real estate, right?
Yeah, their primary income stream is talking and not doing. Yeah.
And even just getting around better people. Like for me, one of the things that I think helped a lot was that we moved during the first 2 weeks of COVID, right? The first big wave was when we like moved.
It's a great time.
It was a great
time
time.
to move.
But what it did, I guess, protected me from was like joining all these groups, because now I look at a lot of real estate groups and nothing against them, but it's all people at the same level, networking with people at the same level. And it's like you can't get advice from someone at your level, right? So when I moved here, I had a few connections that I knew, but like I went to a guy he runs a REIT that has probably $2 billion of real estate, and he's been around for 60 years. So it's like the advice he could give me, I want to hear it, right? And now with the internet, that advice is easy. You can get it. I just watched an interview from the guy who runs Starlight. They're the biggest real estate holder in the world, right? I don't know him, but I can take advice from him opposed to someone else.
That's what's unique about our business as well, is, you know, when we talk about passive income, when you're in insurance, you have something called a trail or residual income. And that's everyone's dream, is obviously do nothing and get paid. Unfortunately, in order to get to that point, you got to do a lot. I remember when I started out, it was my second year with the company, and I got my first renewal check, and it was $72. I was on top of the world because I paid for my cell phone at the time. But thinking back, like $72, that was for work that I had already done. And I mean, obviously $72 isn't a whole lot, but you fast forward 14 years, and that number, you know, hovers around 20 grand a month. You just think back at the beginning, you looked at it like this is free money. And now you look at it as I worked really, really hard to get there, to get to that point. I don't think there is such a thing as passive unless you have the capital to invest in something like you're doing. But again, how do you get that capital?
Yeah,
you got to do it.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff, it's just it's such simple math if people did it. Like it's like everyone, whatever the goal is, $1 million a year. We'll just do the math on you work 2,000 hours. That's no one in the world makes that much money, right? So, and that's where the trail, or for us, it's distributions we send out monthly. As soon as someone gets that, it changes the way they think of something. Because even if it's $100, you're like, well, that's 2 hours I didn't work, and I can spend that now, you know? And I think that having that passive income really does change people, the perspective of that it has to be an hour of time for $1. And on the other side, it's like you might put in at the beginning hundreds of hours for $0, and then it comes, right?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, I forget who said it, but he said, if you're never willing to work more than what you're getting paid for, you'll never get paid for more than you work. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that people unfortunately are scared of, is putting in the time, putting in the work, getting themselves to a point where they have the ability to create true passive income. As I said it earlier, it's unfortunate how we just need everything now. I want immediate results. If this isn't going to work in a month, like a month, what are you talking about? I don't care what you're learning to do for the first time. In the first month, you're probably going to suck. Even if you suck a little less than someone else, you're still probably going to suck. Just put the work in.
Yeah. How do you balance that though? Because I live in this world where it probably almost too much that way, where it's like, like now I could get a different house, but I'm like, well, I'm not going to buy my dream house. I'm not even going to buy a house I want to live in 10 years. So I'll just stay in the house I am. Or like, we want to get an office, and I'm like, well, I know that we'll be double the size in 2 years, so why don't I just wait until then? And then it's like delayed gratification, but there does come a time when you have to kind of balance that, I guess. Is there anything for you, like what's the big goal? Do you have one?
I think going back to my grandfather's advice, the thing that I use my insurance business for is to live the life that I want. And I think getting to a point where your cash flow is what it is allows you to either continue growing, which I'm always going to do inside of this business, but it's also allowed me to, be an ownership group of a restaurant, which, I love to eat, love to drink. So get in that industry. But just play with different things and have the financial ability to do it. So as far as what the big goal is, inside of my business, I want to get to a point where, $4 million of income is there on a yearly basis. Outside of my business, I just want to have the freedom to live life. I've got an 8-year-old. I don't ever have to tell somebody when I'm working, when I'm not working. And I have that freedom because of the sacrifice over the last 10 years. So just more of that.
So how did you balance at the beginning? Because that's something where people always struggle with, or I always call it it's a justified excuse. So if someone's out of shape, they're like, my kid's busy. I'd rather spend time with my kids, or work's a bad one. It's like, I'm not going to give up this part of my life for a future version because I want to.
Yeah.
And that's always a tough balance, but
I don't even like the word balance. Yeah. I hate the word balance because I think if your goal is up here and your work ethic is down here, you're just going to convince yourself as to why you were never able to achieve your goals, and what you said, justified excuse. I think that integration is a word that I would use. So for example, for the first 10 years of my career, I was moving once a year, different city, different office, open it up, find talent, put them in charge, all of those things. There was no balance. I was working all the time, but I'm very family oriented, and I just had my family with me all the time. Very similar to what you were talking about when, the kids were in the playpen and they were with mom and dad, but you guys were renovating a unit. I think that you need to find a way to get to where you want. And if you don't want it to take you 40 years, that means there's got to be some level of sacrifice there. So even moving to Winnipeg, lost a lot of friends, lost comfort, lost family, separation. All of those things took place. And a lot of people thought that I was just idiotic for doing it. I heard a lot of, you've been with this company for 6 months. What are you doing? You're packing up and moving to Winnipeg, which is not the nicest city in Canada or anywhere. You took a lot of flack for that. But again, when the vision is there and you understand what you're trying to accomplish, what wouldn't you do?
Yeah. Do you think that that's a big reason people don't level up is losing people?
I think it's different for everybody. I think in order to level up, you need to understand you're naturally going to lose people because you typically are who you surround yourself with. And if you have people who don't necessarily encourage that or push you to achieve those dreams, I think that, you're going to lose people. Do I think people are scared of it? I think that's a justified excuse.
Yeah. Do you think you could do it all again? Like if it went to zero, would you be willing to put in the work starting over?
I would say yes and no, because I think, 22-year-old me looking at what is required without knowing the outcome, I probably would have said no, because that would have been scary. There's a lot of stuff there. But at the same time, if I knew what the outcome was, I would have probably went harder.
Yeah.
You've been in real estate for 7 years, but going all the way back to the gym days, obviously not being able to predict COVID and what would come from that. If you had to start from zero right now, would you choose the same path? Would you do the same thing?
Yeah, I think I'd do the same thing, but I'd do this like a thought experiment all the time. And I know we were in the same meeting where I think you were there one of the guys talked about, he's much more successful and going in multiple times in his career. I'm like, the risk we took with the gym, was everything we had to do that. But I think business, it's kind of like gambling. If you go to play roulette or whatever game and you put $100 down, you're risking the 100, right? And you double it and you keep going. And let's say you hit it big and now you're at 50,000. To double, to put that all on the line is a lot harder, right? But really, you only walked in there with 100. But you're going back in lifestyle, you're going back in social status. And so like, yeah, the work part, I've always, that's just never has been an issue for me. I enjoy it or come find a way to enjoy whatever I do. But I think of that lots. Like if it came down to today, if it's like going 100% all in from zero, to risk it, it gets harder and harder for sure. But I think there'll be a point where that will come, where it's like, here's a big opportunity. This is a life-changing thing, and you have to make that decision. I just think it gets harder the farther along you get.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in order to get to where you have, or I have, or anybody with any level of success, do you believe that it's necessary at some point to be all in?
I do, yeah. Yeah, I think you have to do it calculated. And like I said, most people are scared to do that. But most people, the risk isn't there. It's like if
their tolerance, the
risk tolerance in there, but if you really step back and looked at it and you were, whatever your thing is, starting out, like really for me, if that gym failed, I always had in the back of my head, I'm like, I can just go work at a job. I'll be no different than anyone else, right? And it's like, sure, you lose that little bit. That's why I think the risk gets harder farther along. But most people don't have that. And it's like the pain of today has to be greater than the pleasure of tomorrow. And people just can't get over that. And that's something where like I live in a world of dissatisfaction. I call it whatever you want to call it, blissfully dissatisfied. So I'm like, I love my life. I love my family. I love where I'm at. And the other side of me is like, I hate it. I want to be here, and I'm here. And it just, that's, I live my life from this point of view, looking back. And I'm sure you miss out on lots of stuff. And, I don't celebrate wins a lot because I'm just like, this is, I'm here and I don't want to be. I want to be here, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of
happy but not satisfied.
Yeah. And I think that, but I don't think I'll ever be satisfied because I'll get here and the pull will be farther ahead.
I think that speaks to your vision for yourself, though. And I think when you talk about risk tolerance or going all in on something, I think that there's a huge issue with people believing that they can achieve what they want. And I think when you're all in on yourself and you know that, I think that makes the decision a lot easier when you know where you want to go. Yeah. Do you think a big problem is people just don't think about where they want to go, or they're just kind of horse blinders?
Yeah. I think that the two problems are, one, the thing people don't really understand, going all in or burning the ships, that came from you would land and you would burn the ships. So it's like you either are going to go back. Fight or you're going to die. You're going to die or you're going to win. And that's all the only option. You can't go back.
Yeah.
And most people will never do that. They'll have a safety net where it's like, if it doesn't work, it's not that bad, right? So it's like, and I think that keeps a lot of people. And then to me, one of the books that's changed my life, and I've read it at different points in my life, and every time is different, but it's Grant's The 10X Rule. And a lot of people laugh it off and say, oh, it's 10X, why don't you 100X or whatever? The premise of the book is that most people set a goal and hit it. And that's the problem, right? So they took pessimistic people and optimistic people. The optimistic people had way higher goals and never hit them. And the pessimistic people they were like 80% hit them. And these people were 5 times farther ahead, right? And so that's always been my things. I'm like, when you do that and then work backwards, it changes. So for me, I still have this paper, and I had drawn, we had bought a house, our first house we bought, and it was like $150,000, and we'd done a renovation. I'm like, man, it's probably worth 175. I'm like, if I could do that and then buy another house. And I drew on a piece of paper, I had like one house, two houses, and I had this 10-year plan to have 10 houses. I'm like, if I could have 10 rental properties, this is gonna be crazy. Like, right? And then I read that book, and I'm like, well, that's if I just change the goal, because if that's the goal, and a lot of people it is in whatever business, it's like, I just want to be here. And if you do it differently, so let's say you set that goal at 100, that it changes, because now I have to buy 10 units a year, so I can't buy a single family. If you do it 1,000, that changes even more, because then it's like, well, now I can't use my own money. I have to raise capital. I have to do all these things. But what it also does is attracts. If I started this company and said I want 100 units by the time I'm 40, I wouldn't have a single employee, because there isn't room for them.
Yeah.
There's not room for their goals, right? So we want to have, in the next 3 years, we'll have 1,000 more units than we have today. Then we want to have, we want to have $1 billion for under management in 10 years. Any person who doesn't want to run their own company has room for that. We have room for them in our company, right? Their goals can be there. And I think it's goal setting and then following through with it. Again, people underestimate what you can do in a short amount of time or overestimate in a short amount of time and give up, and underestimate long term. So
it just changed your thinking on where you want to be.
Yeah, and it works backwards. So it's like, if you want, like with your company, if you want 40,000 agents, that things change. It's a different look. So you have to say, at 40,000, we need to do this. So everything we did with this company was with that in mind. So when we started, a lot of companies raise capital. They just do note investing. And I'm like, I can't do that, because if we're going to raise $100 million, I can't have 1,000 different notes tied to these things. You can't get proper loans, and it's like a mess. So we paid all the money up. It costs a lot of money to set up what we have today, right? And you set it up correctly, and now we can run this for a long time this way. But you always work backwards from the big goal.
Thinking 5 years down the road.
Yeah, and even now, it's like we're putting in everything we do. We're putting in systems that we don't need today. We need them when we have 100 employees maybe. But now it's going to be easy when we get there. Or we're getting an investor portal. Don't need it today, right? But you will one day, so you may as well. It just changes the way you look at things. Is there any books that have changed your life, or things what would be a good piece of advice for someone to?
I think books that changed my life. There's a few that I continue to go back to always. I think they're pretty standard as far as self-development is concerned, but How to Win Friends and Influence People is a huge one. There's a really good book as far as what I do with developing teams, developing people. It's called the 17 Irrefutable Laws of Teamwork by Maxwell. That one's really good. There's 360 Degree Leader. I think when people ask that question, they're really looking for a place to start. And I think the easiest answer is it doesn't matter what you read, it just matters that you do.
Thanks a lot for coming on. If people wanted to, if they're interested in like the company or a new career, where's the best place to get a hold of you?
aoworkfromhome.com.
What if they want to work with you specifically?
Then they can reach out to me. They can reach out to me on Instagram or through email.
All right. Well, like always, if you guys can subscribe, give us a like, it goes a long ways. Thank you. Have you ever seen, not looks wise, Chris, but like Matthew McConaughey get interviewed? Like he talks slow and like very relaxed. That's kind of how you are.
Thank you. All I heard is
Not
I look like
looks-wise.
Matthew McConaughey.
You know that he smells really bad?
How do you know that?
They say he like doesn't use soap or anything apparently, and like they say sometimes like actors, like everyone always complains about him in films, like he stinks so terrible bad.
Really?
Could have been made up, but I did hear that. Why would you want that? I'm gonna die of soap poison. It's big soap industry that's killing everyone.
Yeah, big soap.
You guys gotta get in on that.